And so we settle in. You can feel your body beginning to grow heavy in the most pleasant way. In our time together tonight, there is nothing to examine, nothing to understand, only the gentle rhythm of a story about a belief so strange. It feels like a dream itself. A story from a time when learned men, physicians and philosophers, believed that a part of you could simply get up and go for a walk inside your own body. Before we drift too far, if you feel a connection to this place, you're welcome to leave a quiet, like or subscribe. Think of it not as a toss, but as leaving a soft footprint in the sand before you continue your journey inward. And if you feel like it, you could even leave a quiet comment, letting me know what city you're listening from and what time it is there. It's just a nice way of knowing we're all resting in this quiet peace together, all around the world. All right. Let the shadows in your room grow long and soft. Maybe you can hear the faint sound of your own breathing. And together, let's allow the story to begin. The day starts like any other. Sunlight, thick with dust motes, slices through the single glazed window of your small home. It's not the bright, clear light of a modern morning, but a hazy, gentle glow that smells of wood smoke and damp earth. You've been awake for hours. Of course, the sun doesn't wait, and neither does the work. You pull the rough sponge tunic over your head, the wool scratching faintly at your neck. A sensation so familiar you barely notice it anymore. The floor is cold and uneven beneath your bare feet as you move to the hearth. The embers from last night are still faintly glowing, a small red heart in the grey ash. You coax them back to life with a few breaths and some dry kindling. The familiar routine, a comfort in the chill of the morning. Your world is one of textures and smells. The splintery handle of the water bucket, the smooth, cool weight of dough as you need it on the floured wooden board, the sharp tang of herbs hanging from the rafters to dry. This is your life, a cycle of tasks dictated by the sun and the seasons. It is predictable, it is stable, and, in its own way, it is safe. You know your place in this world. You are a wife, a keeper of the home, a presence as steady as the hearth you tend. Today, there is bread to bake, a tear in your husband's shirt to mend, and the endless, low-level war against dirt and damp that defines domestic life. As you lean over the fire, turning the flatbreads on a hot stone, a strange warmth blossoms in your chest. It's not the heat of the fire on your face. This is different. It's an internal heat. The flush that creeps up your neck and makes the fine hairs on your arms stand on end. You stand up straight, patting your chest absently, and take a deep breath of the smoky air. Probably just the fire. You think, or perhaps some bad air, a miasma, has drifted in from the street where the tanner dumps his foul-smelling water. That's what the barber surgeon says causes most ailments. Anyway, bad air getting into the body and upsetting its delicate balance. You dismiss it. The feeling fades, and you go back to your work. But an hour later, as you sit in the low light, pulling a needle and thread through thick cloth, it returns. This time, it's accompanied by a curious flutter, a feeling of tightness high in your throat. It's not a cough, and you're not choking. It feels misplaced, like a trapped bird, baiting its wings where it shouldn't be. You press your fingers to the base of your throat, swallowing a few times. The sensation is unnerving, an internal ripple in the otherwise still pond of your day. Your life is so deeply physical, tied to the aches and pains of real-world labor. You know the dull ache in your back after a day of hauling water, the sting of a small burn from a stray ember. This is none of those things. This is an alien feeling, a message from a part of yourself you don't know how to listen to. Historians still debate just how much a woman like you would have understood about your own body. Beyond the practicalities of cycles and childbirth, was there a hidden knowledge, passed down from mother to daughter in quiet whispers? Or was your understanding of your own inner workings entirely shaped by the often bizarre theories of the men who claim to be experts? You look out the window at the sliver of muddy street you can see. People are going about their day. Nothing has changed. The world is exactly as it was this morning. Yet, Inside you, something has shifted. You feel a prickle of anxiety, a quiet dread that has no name. You are a sensible woman, not given to flights of fancy. You don't believe in the fairy stories told to frighten children. But this feeling, this is real. This warmth, this pressure, this internal restlessness. It's as if a piece of your own anatomy has suddenly woken up, and you have no idea what it wants. For the first time in a long time, the familiar landscape of your own body feels foreign. The feeling doesn't go away. It's a persistent guest who has shown up unannounced and now refuses to leave. You try to push it from your mind, focusing on the familiar rhythm of your work. You scrub the wooden table with a stiff bristled brush and sand, your arms moving in a circular motion you've performed thousands of times, but the tightness in your throat remains. A subtle pressure that makes each swallow feel deliberate. The warmth in your chest comes and goes in waves, like a tide of heat. It's distracting, it's unnerving. Later in the day, when you go to the communal well to fetch more water, you see Elspeth, your husband's aunt. She is a woman whose face is a roadmap of her 70 years. Her back permanently stooped, but her eyes are as sharp as the needle she's so good at reading. She knows things. She knows which herbs to chew for a toothache and which poultice to use on a burn. She looks at you, her head tilted, and her expression softens. You look troubled, child. Your humors are fighting. You hesitate. It feels foolish to speak of it, to give voice to a sensation so formless. But Elspeth's gaze is patient. So you try to explain. The heat, the feeling of a knot just below your jaw. She listens, nodding slowly, her eyes never leaving your face. When you finish, she makes a small, clicking sound with her tongue. "Oh," she says, her voice a dry rustle of leaves. "It is the mother," she is wondering. "The mother." You look at her, confused. You know she isn't talking about your own mother, who passed years ago. Elspeth leans closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if sharing a great and ancient secret. "The womb," she clarifies. "It is like an animal. You say, an animal in the pasture of the belly. When it is content, it stays put. But sometimes, it gets restless. It goes for a walk." You stare at her. An animal. Inside you. The idea is so profoundly strange that you almost laugh. But the look on Elspeth's face is one of complete seriousness. This isn't a joke. This is her truth. And as she speaks, you realize this isn't just her own peculiar idea. It's a piece of wisdom as old and weathered as she is. And she's not wrong, in a historical sense. The idea didn't start with her, or even in your medieval village. It's an ancient echo, a ghost of a theory from a world of marble temples and sun-drenched amphitheaters. The old Greek physicians, the ones whose names are spoken with such reverence by learned men, they started it all. They looked at a woman's body, so different from their own, and tried to explain its mysteries. And the uterus, or hysteria, as they called it, was the greatest mystery of all. To them, it was just an organ. It was a separate creature. It had desires. It had a will of its own. It would become unhappy and, when it did, it would pull up its roots and travel through the body in search of something better. A bit rude of it, really, to not even leave a note. Historians today are still not entirely sure how literally the average person, or even the doctors of the time, took this. Did they truly picture a small, creature-like organ scurrying about? Or was it more of a powerful metaphor for feelings and symptoms they couldn't otherwise explain? For you, listening to Elspeth, the line between metaphor and reality is becoming terrifyingly thin. Elspeth continues her whispered lesson. It has a sense of things. You see, she says, tapping the side of her nose. It can smell. If it gets too high, it can choke you, press on your heart. It blocks the channels to the mind, makes a woman frantic. This, right here, is a truly peculiar and widespread belief of the time, that your womb had a rudimentary sense of smell, like a mole or a shrew. This detail, this strange bit of folk science, would become the entire basis for its treatment. She pats your arm, her hand surprisingly strong. Don't you worry. We know the ways. The wandering mother can be coaxed back home. You walk back to your small doghouse, the water bucket heavy in your hand, its weight a familiar anchor in a world that has suddenly tilted on its axis. But the water is no longer the heaviest thing you are carrying. You are now carrying a new and unsettling picture in your mind. The picture of an animal, a living thing, residing in the deepest part of you. An animal that is currently unhappy. An animal that has decided to go exploring. And as you step back into the shadows of your home, you can't help but place a hand on your stomach, wondering, with a fresh wave of anxiety, just where it might be going. The idea lodges in your mind like a splinter. An animal, wondering. It colors every strange sensation you feel. When a wave of dizziness washes over you as you stand up too quickly, you think, it's moving higher. When you feel a dull ache in your abdomen, you wonder, is it settling, or just resting before it continues its journey? The world outside remains the same, but your inner world has been completely landscaped by Elspeth's words. You try to reason with yourself. You are not a fool. An organ can't just take a stroll, can it? But what do you know of organs? The inside of a body is a land of mystery, a place no one sees except for the butcher, and he deals with pigs and sheep, not people. Your knowledge is a patchwork of folklore, religious teachings, and the half-remembered pronouncements of the barber surgeon, and in that patchwork, the idea of a wandering worm doesn't seem quite so impossible. A few days later, the feeling of tightness in your throat becomes more pronounced. It's a constant, nagging pressure. You find yourself clearing your throat often, trying to dislodge a lump that isn't there. Your husband, a man of simple appetites and few words, starts to notice you're not catching a throat sickness. Are you? He asks one evening, his brow furrowed with a practical concern. A sick wife means less work gets done. It's not unkindness, just a fact of your life. No, you say, your voice a little hoarse. I feel well enough. It's just a tightness. You don't dare tell him Elspeth's theory. He would likely scoff, call it old women's tales. And yet, the theory is more learned than you know. It has a pedigree. It has been written down in important books by men with long beards and serious minds. Let's drift back for a moment, far from your smoky hut, back to ancient Greece, to the cool stone benches where students listened to their masters. A man named Plato, a philosopher whose ideas would echo for 2,000 years, is writing in his work Timaeus. He describes the womb as an animal within an animal, one which is eager to bear children, and here is the crucial part he adds. When it remains barren for too long, it becomes vexed and angry. It gets discontented and begins to wander throughout the body, blocking passages, obstructing breath, and causing all manner of diseases. He's not the only one. The most famous doctor of all, Hippocrates, the very father of medicine, he has similar ideas. He and his followers, the Hippocratic school, write extensively about what they call hysterical suffocation. They believe the womb is, above all, a moist organ. Its natural state is damp. When it doesn't receive the moisture that comes from marital relations and bearing children, it starts to dry out. And a dry womb is a light womb. It becomes parched, thirsty, and so, like an animal searching for a river, it begins to wander upwards, seeking moisture from the other, wetter organs of the body, like the liver or the heart. This idea, that your womb is essentially a houseplant that you've forgotten to water, is a cornerstone of ancient medicine, and it's a theory with a very convenient, built-in prescription, one that keeps the social order humming along perfectly. Historians still argue about the chicken and egg nature of this theory. Did the medical belief arise from a genuine attempt to explain symptoms, or was it a convenient pseudo-scientific justification for a social structure that required women to marry and have children? It's a debate that's almost impossible to settle, but the effect, for a woman like you, is the same. Your body is not entirely your own. It has a biological imperative. And if that imperative isn't met, the organ itself will rebel. Back in your heart, you press your fingers against your throat. You can feel your own pulse. A steady, rhythmic beat. But beneath that, in your imagination, you feel another, phantom movement. The slow, upward creep of a giant thirsty thing. Elspeth had said the womb was like an animal in a pasture, but Plato and Hippocrates had given it a motive. It wasn't just wandering aimlessly. It was on a quest. It was looking for a drink, and the thought that a part of your own body was so parched, so desperate, that it would travel from its home to quench its thirst is, somehow, even more disturbing than the thought of it just being a bit restless. It gives the whole affair a sense of desperation. A grim purpose that makes your own throat feel even tighter. The idea of balanced is everything in your world. The balance of sun and rain for a good harvest. The balance of work and rest to keep your body from breaking. And, according to every learned person you've ever half heard, the balance of the 4 vital fluids inside you. This is a truth as solid and unquestionable as the existence of God. Your body, they say, is a small vessel containing 4 liquids, or humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Your personality, your health, your very essence, are all dictated by the mix of these humors. Too much blood, and you're sanguine, cheerful, rosy cheeked, and a bit prone to overexcitement. Too much phlegm makes you phlegmatic, calm, slow, perhaps a little lazy. A surplus of yellow bile results in a choleric nature, fiery, ambitious, and quick to anger. And too much black bile, the melancholy humor, makes you thoughtful, quiet, and prone to sadness. It's like a recipe. A bit too much of one ingredient, and the whole dish is off. When you are healthy, your humors are in perfect, harmonious balance. Sickness is simply a state of imbalance. A fever is too much heat, caused by an excess of blood or yellow bile. A chill is too much cold, from an overabundance of phlegm. Every ailment, from a headache to a stomach cramp, can be traced back to these 4 fluids sloshing around inside you. It's a beautifully simple, if completely wrong, system, and everyone, from the university-trained physician to the village healer like Elspeth, subscribes to it. So when you begin to feel not just the tightness in your throat but also a recurring irritability, you don't think of it as stress or anxiety. You think, my humors are fighting. The internal heat you feel is a clear sign of an excess of a hot humor, probably yellow bile, the humor of anger and bitterness. This fits perfectly with the wandering womb theory. The dry, wandering womb, in its agitated state, is stirring everything up. It's like a spoon mixing the 4 liquids in your body into a chaotic, bubbling mess. One afternoon, your husband comes home from the fields early, frustrated. A tool has broken, and the cost of mending it will eat into the small bit of coin you had saved. He slams his hand on the table, not at you, but at the world. Normally, you would soothe him with a calm word and a piece of bread. But today, the sound makes you jump, and a flush of irritation, hot and sharp, surges through you. Must you make such a racket? You snap, your voice tighter than you intended. He looks up, surprised. You are not a snapping sort of woman. You are, by nature, more phlegmatic, or perhaps a little melancholy. You are not choleric. He stares at you for a long moment, his frustration with the tool now replaced by a new, focused concern. Your temper is short, he says slowly, like sour wine. You immediately feel a flush of shame, but the irritation is still there, simmering just below the surface. You know you are out of sorts. You feel it. The world seems sharper, more grating. The scrape of a cartwheel outside, the cry of a neighbor's baby. It all feels like an assault on your senses. This must be the yellow bile. You think. The room, in its upward journey, has disturbed the bile, sloshing it around, making you bitter and angry. This concept of the four humors is so pervasive that it leaves no room for other explanations. The idea that your emotional state could be influenced by, say, lack of sleep, or worry about money, or the simple, grinding exhaustion of your daily life, is not really on the table. The cause must be internal, mechanical, and humoral. It's all about the liquids. There's a strange, almost comical element to this that is lost on you, but which historians find fascinating. For instance, different foods were believed to affect different humors. A cucumber, being cold and wet, would be prescribed to cool down a choleric, fiery person. A hot pepper, conversely, could liven up a phlegmatic individual. It was medicine by menu. Some texts even went so far as to suggest that the humors of the cook could be transferred to the food they prepared. An angry cook could, in theory, make an angry stew. The debate among modern scholars isn't about whether people believed in the humors. They absolutely did. The question is how rigidly they applied it in their daily lives. Was it a constant consideration, or something they only thought about when they got sick? For you, right now, it's a constant consideration. It's the only framework you have to understand the unsettling changes happening within you. You are no longer just a woman with a wandering womb. You are a woman whose internal balance is dangerously off. The heat from your restless organ is cooking your yellow bile, making it acrid and potent. Your entire system is being thrown into chaos, and the evidence is right there in the sour words leaving your mouth. You look at your husband's confused and slightly wary face, and you feel a chill of fear that has nothing to do with phlegm. Here's saying you change. And in a world that values stability above all else, change is dangerous. The days grow shorter, the air crisper, but the private heat inside you continues its strange, intermittent simmering. It has become a part of your daily rhythm now. This sudden bloom of warmth that has nothing to do with the hearth or the sun. Sometimes it's a gentle flush, the creeping blush that you can hide. Other times, it's a furnace blast that leaves you feeling breathless and slick with a fine sheen of sweat. Even on a cool day, you try to hide it. When a hot flush strikes, you turn your face away from your husband, pretending to be intensely interested in a loose thread on the wall tapestry. You fan yourself with your hand, casually, as if fly were bothering you. But the heat is undeniable. It makes your heart beat a little faster, a frantic drum against your ribs. In our modern understanding, what you're experiencing is a classic symptom of perimenopause, a completely normal, if sometimes uncomfortable, biological transition. Your body's production of hormones is fluctuating, creating these vasomotor episodes. It's a natural process. A chapter in a woman's life that is as predictable as teething in a baby or the creaking of joints in old age. But, in your time, there is no concept of menopause. There is no language for it. A woman's life is divided into 3 simple stages: maid, wife, and widow. Her reproductive life is a simple binary. She is either fertile or she is not. The transition between those states is a shadowy, unpaid territory, and into that void of knowledge, old fears and bizarre theories rush in to fill the space. So this internal heat isn't seen as a natural fluctuation. It's a symptom, a dangerous one, according to the logic of the time. Your womb is not just dry, it is now becoming heated. Like a clay pot left in the kiln for too long. It's getting hotter and hotter, and a hot, dry womb is even more restless, even more desperate to move, than a merely dry one. One evening, you are dishing out a thin pottage of boiled grains and root vegetables for dinner. As you lean over the steaming pot, a powerful wave of heat surges through you. It's so intense you feel momentarily faint. You grip the edge of the table to steady yourself, your knuckles wet. A bead of sweat trickles down your temple. Your husband looks up from sharpening a blade by the firelight. He sees the sheen on your skin. He sees your slightly parted lips as you try to catch your breath. You are feverish, he says. It's not a question. It's a statement of fact. No, I am not. You insist. Though your voice is weak. It passes. It is just a word. It is a fever, he repeats, more firmly this time. A dry fever. Your skin is hot, but you do not shiver. He is interpreting the signs through the lens of his understanding. A dry fever is a sign of a severe humoral imbalance, an excess of choler or hot blood. It's a serious condition. He doesn't see a hot flash. He sees a disease, and a disease needs a cure. This misunderstanding highlights a fascinating and frustrating aspect of medical history. Many so-called female complaints that filled the pages of medical texts for centuries were likely just descriptions of everyday biological events, pathologized because they were not understood. Menstruation, pregnancy, and menopause were not just processes. They were events that could easily throw the delicate female system into disarray. There is even a niche, but interesting, debate among historians about the diet of the time. Some argue that certain ergot fungi, which can grow on rye grain, a staple of the peasant diet, could have caused symptoms like burning sensations or mild hallucinations. Could some of what you're feeling be a low-grade food poisoning? It's a fringe theory, and most scholars dismiss it in favor of the more obvious explanation of menopause. But it's a reminder that even the bread you eat is a variable we can't fully account for. You try to explain that you are not sick, that the feeling is strange but not debilitating. But how can you describe it? You have no words. Saying, I am experiencing a vasomotor episode due to fluctuating estrogen levels is centuries away from being possible. All you can say is, I feel a heat inside me. And in the medical dictionary of your time, a heat inside you means one thing. Your humors are dangerously out of balance. And the organ responsible for your womanhood is getting dangerously hot and bothered. Your husband stands up, his face etched with worry. We must do something, he says. This cannot be left to fester. Tomorrow, we will see the barber surgeon. A knot of dread tightens in your stomach. The barber surgeon. A man whose medical toolkit consists mainly of razors for bleeding, cups for drawing out bad humors, and a terrifying array of pulling instruments for teeth. You have seen the results of his work. The pale, weakened neighbors after a good bleeding. The infected gums of those who've had a tooth pull. Going to him means your private, internal strangeness is about to become a public matter. And the cures, you suspect, might be far worse than the complaint. The dread you felt the night before follows you all the way to the barber surgeon's shop. His establishment isn't a clean, quiet office. It's a multi-purpose hub of communal grooming and minor medical procedures, and it smells powerfully of soap, purr, and something faintly metallic that you try not to identify. A straight pull by the door, signifying his trade, seems to twist like a warning. The barber surgeon himself is a man named Thomas, with thick fingers and a confident, booming voice. He listens to your husband's description of your dry fever and your own hesitant additions about the tightness. You feel a flush of embarrassment as you speak, describing your body's strange behavior in front of this man you barely know. You mention the feeling of a lump in your throat, the pressure high in your chest. Thomas nods sagely, stroking his beard. He doesn't even need to examine you. He has heard these symptoms before. Oh, yes, he declares, his voice filling the small room. A closet case. The mother has begun its climb. He uses the same term as Elspeth. The mother, a common euphemism for the womb. The heat you feel is the anger of the organ itself, and the tightness in your chest. That is the first station of its journey. He explains it to your husband as if plotting a military campaign. The womb, he says, has detached from its rightful place in the lower abdomen. It is now ascending. The feeling of pressure in your chest is not a feeling at all. It is a physical reality. Your womb is, at this very moment, physically pressing against the bottom of your ribs, preparing to invade the upper cavity of your torso. This idea of the womb's journey is remarkably detailed in the medical literature of the era. It wasn't just a vague wandering. Doctors had mapped its progress. Its first stop was often the hypochondria, the area just under the ribs. From there, it could move further up, pressing on the heart and lungs. And its final, most dangerous destination was the throat and head. Each stage of the journey had its own specific symptoms. The tightness you feel is textbook. You are, in his eyes, a living, breathing illustration from a medical manuscript. You want to argue. You want to say, that's impossible. I would feel it. It would hurt. But how can you argue with such certainty? He is the expert. He has seen this before. Your own feelings are unreliable witnesses compared to the weight of established medical doctrine. He turns to a shelf lined with murky glass bottles and clay pots. The humors are in a perilous state, he proclaims. The choler is clearly agitated, cooked by the heat of the wandering womb. We must calm the humors and, more importantly, we must persuade the mother to return to her chambers. This is where historical theories get a bit fuzzy and contradictory. What exactly did doctors like Thomas think was happening? Some ancient texts described the womb as moving to press on the diaphragm, which they believed was the seat of the mind, causing franticness. Others, particularly in your later medieval period, saw the body as a network of vessels and channels, and the womb was blocking these crucial pathways, causing a backup of vapors and humors that would then rise to the brain. The exact mechanics were, and still are, a subject of debate among historians who study these old texts. Was it pressure, blockage, or a sympathetic reaction? For you, the distinction is academic. The diagnosis is terrifying either way. As a bizarre aside, this wasn't the only organ believed to have a mind of its own. Some medical traditions, particularly those influenced by Galen, the Roman physician, gave a certain autonomy to the stomach and liver as well. But the womb was unique. It was the only organ whose discontent was believed to be so powerful that it could turn a woman against her own mind. A concept that no male organ was ever burdened with. Thomas selects a small, dark bottle filled with a thick, syrupy liquid. She must take this twice a day. He instructs your husband, ignoring you completely. It will cool the blood and pacify the bile. He then looks at you. A new, more serious expression on his face. And we must address the wandering directly. He explains that the womb, having started its journey, is like a stubborn mule that has left its stable. You can't just ask it to go back. You have to either chase it from the front or entice it from behind. This two-pronged approach, one to repel, one to attract, will form the basis of your entire treatment. You leave the shop with the bottle of bitter-smelling liquid in your hand and a sense of profound unease. The diagnosis has been confirmed. It's no longer just an old woman's tale whispered at the well. It has been legitimized by a man of science, a man with a striped pole outside his door. Your condition is real. It has a name, and it has a map. The tightness in your chest is no longer a phantom sensation. It is a landmark. It is the first pin pushed into the map of your own body, marking the slow, inexorable invasion of an enemy that is, impossibly, a part of you. The bottle from the barber surgeon sits on your shelf like a dark omen. The medicine within is a thick, brownish sludge that smells vaguely of burnt herbs and something acrid. Like vinegar, following Thomas' instructions, your husband watches as you take the first dose. You hold your breath and swallow the spoonful of viscous liquid. It's unbelievably foul. The bitterness coats your tongue, making your eyes water and your stomach churn. You have to fight the urge to spit it out. This, you are told, is how you know it's working. Good medicine is supposed to taste awful. It's a sign of its potency. This is the first part of the treatment, chasing the womb from the front. The theory is beautifully, if disgustingly, simple, since the womb has a sense of smell and is currently residing somewhere in your upper torso. You must introduce unpleasant odors to the top half of your body to scare it away. You must make the upper regions so inhospitable, so foul-smelling, that the womb will turn tail and flee back to the pelvis where it belongs. So, the bitter potion is just the beginning. Thomas also prescribed smelling salts and fumigation S. He gives you a small pouch of pungent herbs to wear around your neck. It's a mix of galbanum and asafoetida. Resins known for their powerful, sulfurous stench. Asafoetida, in particular, has a nickname you'll later learn, Devil's Tongue, and it lives up to its name. The smell is eye-wateringly bad, a mix of garlic and drop that clings to your clothes and hair. You are to sniff this pouch whenever you feel the tightness in your chest or a wave of heat. Imagine yourself sitting in your small, dark home, deliberately inhaling the scent of something that smells like spiritual decay. It's a truly bizarre sensory experience. You are actively making yourself miserable in the hopes of scaring a piece of your own anatomy into submission. The treatments get even more invasive. Thomas recommends pessaries, small plugs of wool or linen soaked in foul substances, to be placed. Well, you are instructed to place them as high up in the nasal passages as you can tolerate. Other common prescriptions you are thankfully spared, for now, include burning old leather or inhaling the smoke, or drinking potions made from castor oil, a substance derived from beavers that was known for its unpleasant taste and smell. This therapeutic principle, using foul odors to repel the womb downwards, is one of the most consistent treatments for hysteria for over 2,000 years. It starts with the ancient Greeks and Romans and carries right on through the medieval period and even into the Renaissance. It is a medical idea with incredible staying power. And here's a truly strange detail from the annals of medical history. Sometimes, the logic was reversed. For a woman whose womb had supposedly prolapsed or fallen too low, doctors would prescribe sweet-smelling fumigation S for the nose and foul-smelling ones for the lower body, trying to lure it back up. It was a completely symmetrical and completely nonsensical form of medicine. The academic debate here is a subtle one. Did physicians genuinely believe the womb had a nose and was making a conscious decision to free the bad smells? Or did they operate on a more sympathetic principle, believing that foul substances had a natural property or energy that would drive the disease which they personified as the womb downwards? Most modern historians lean towards the latter, suggesting it was less about a literal-minded organ and more about a philosophy of medicine based on opposites and sympathies. But for you, the patient, the practical effect is the same. You have to stink. You endure the treatments for days. You dutifully swallow the vile potion. You wear the stinking pouch around your neck until you can no longer smell anything else. The world becomes a muted landscape of odors, bolded overpowered by the devil's tongue. Your husband gives you a wide berth. When you go to the market, people wrinkle their noses as you pass. You are carrying a cloud of medicinal foulness with you everywhere you go. And the worst part, it isn't working. The tightness in your chest is still there. The hot flashes still come, unpredictable and fierce. The foul smells do nothing but add a layer of olfactory misery to your existing anxiety. You feel isolated, marked out by the very scent of your cure. You are being punished with stench for a crime your body is committing without your permission. And as you sit there, smelling like a tannery fire, you begin to wonder about the second part of the treatment. If this is what they do to chase it away, what on earth are they going to do to lure it back? After a week of smelling like a cursed bog, with no discernible improvement, your husband decides it's time for stage 2 of the treatment. The barber surgeon had been very clear, chasing the womb from above is only half the battle. You must also entice it from below. If the stick doesn't work, you must offer the carrot. Or in this case, the pottery. The logic is perfectly symmetrical. If foul smells applied to the nose and mouth will drive the womb downwards, then sweet and pleasant smells, applied to the lower body, will act as an irresistible lure. It's like training an animal. You are calling it home with the promise of a treat. The womb, with its supposed delicate sensibilities, is presumed to have a preference for lovely perfumes and will travel back to its rightful place to be nearer to them. So one evening, your husband comes home not with a sack of flour or a mended tool, but with a small, expensive-looking clay jar. It's filled with a fragrant unguent, a thick paste made of goose fat mixed with crushed rose petals, lavender, and a tiny, precious amount of musk. Musk, an aromatic substance harvested from a gland of the musk deer, was an incredibly valuable commodity, often worth more than its weight in gold. The fact that he has spent coin on this shows the depth of his concern. He also brings instructions for a scented steam. You are to boil water with sweet herbs, chamomile, mint, and more lavender, and then sit over it. You are to create a fragrant cloud that will, theoretically, drift upwards and send an aromatic invitation to your wayward organ. This entire procedure feels profoundly awkward and deeply personal. In the privacy of your small home, you perform the ritual. The air, for the first time in days, is filled not with the wretched stink of asafoetida, but with a gentle, floral steam. It's a pleasant smell, a welcome relief, but the context makes it strange. You are not enjoying a perfume for your own pleasure. You are perfuming your lower half as bait. You are treating your own body like a trap. This practice, known as vaginal fumigation, has a history as long and even more varied than its foul-smelling counterpart. Recipes for these scented laws abound in historical medical texts. They included all manner of expensive and exotic ingredients: cinnamon, myrrh, spikenard, and frankincense. The sweet smell was paramount. As you sit there, enveloped in a cloud of herbal steam, you can't help but feel a growing sense of the absurd. One part of your body is being treated like a skunk that must be shooed away, while the other is being treated like a princess who must be wooed with luxurious scents. The sheer contradiction is bewildering. Your body has become a buzzer battleground of odors, a war fought with smells, and here lies a fascinating little nugget of medical history. The very word for the sweet-smelling substances used in these treatments, aromatics, is etymologically related to the Greek word for spices, but the word for the foul-smelling medicinal substances was often derived from words meaning fetid or rotten. Physicians created a whole sensory vocabulary to describe their cures, dividing the world of smells into a clear good and evil, a medical and malodorous. The academic question that still floats around these practices is one of intent versus effect. While the stated intention was to lure the womb, what was the actual physical effect of these treatments? Some modern historians and gynecologists suggest that the warm steam could have had a genuinely soothing effect on pelvic muscles, potentially relieving cramps or tension that might have been part of the initial complaint. So, did the treatment sometimes work by accident, for reasons entirely different from the ones the doctors believe? It's possible that in seeking to treat a fantasy illness, they occasionally stumbled upon a real, if misunderstood, remedy for physical discomfort. But for you, there is no relief. The warmth of the steam is pleasant, the smell of the rose is a luxury, but the tightness in your throat remains. The hot flush is still surge. The core problem, the one you can't name, isn't touched by the war of smells being waged upon your body. The expensive unguent is used sparingly each night. The floral scent is a constant, cloying reminder of your failure to heal. It mixes with the faint, lingering stink of the devil's dung you still wear around your neck, creating a confusing and sickly sweet miasma that is uniquely your own. You smell like a perfumed corpse. And as the days turn into another week, a new and more corrosive feeling begins to take root inside you. Deeper than any wandering organ, it is a feeling of hopelessness. You have been bled, fumigated, perfumed, and poisoned. You have followed all the rules. You have endured the disgust and the indignity, and you are still not well. The medicine, the science of your age, has failed, and when medicine fails, people start looking for other explanations. The failure of the treatment casts a pall over your small home. The bottle of foul medicine is now half empty, a testament to your compliance. The expensive jar of rose unguent is nearly gone, its scent a fading ghost. And yet, nothing has changed. In fact, things might be getting worse. The stress of the situation, the constant focus on your condition, has frayed your nerves. You feel perpetually on edge. Your husband having spent good money on cures that did not cure, is growing frustrated. His concern is slowly curdling into a quiet resentment. He looks at you differently now. You are no longer just his wife who is feeling unwell. You are a problem that refuses to be solved, a broken tool that cannot be mended. One evening, he comes home smelling of ale, his face flushed. He'd been at the tavern with the other men, a rare escape for him. He finds you sitting by the hearth, not mending or spinning, but just staring into the flames. You hadn't the energy for anything else. The day had been filled with a relentless series of hot flashes, leaving you feeling drained and weak. He misinterprets your stillness as sullenness. Still nothing, he asks, his voice rougher than usual. Still sitting there as if you've been cursed. The word cursed hangs in the air. Sharp and ugly, your head snaps up, and the hot, choleric anger you felt before surges back, stronger this time. And what would you have me do? You retort, your voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. Should I perfume myself with more roses, or perhaps drink the rest of that foul poison? Nothing works. It would work if you had faith in it. He shoots back, his own frustration boiling over. If you weren't so contrary, Elspeth says a woman's temperament can fight the cure, that your own bitterness can keep the womb in a state of agitation. It's a cruel, circular logic. The treatment isn't failing. You are failing the treatment. Your emotional state, which you believe is a symptom of the illness, is now being reframed as its cause. This moment is a pivotal one, not just for you, but for the story of this disease. The focus is shifting from the purely mechanical, a wandering organ, imbalance humours, to the realm of the moral and psychological. Your personality, your very character, is now on trial. This was an incredibly common feature of the diagnosis. Medical texts from the period are full of descriptions of the hysterical woman's temperament. She is described as being fickle, deceitful, prone to exaggeration, and emotionally volatile. A simple argument, a bout of sadness, a flush of anger, things that might be excused in a man as a bad day, were, in a woman, seen as symptoms of her defective, womb-dominated nature. The argument escalates. Voices are raised, old grievances, small and buried, are unearthed. You say things you don't mean. He says things he can't take back. It's a typical marital fight, the kind that happens in any home, in any century, when pressures mount and patience wears thin. But in the context of your diagnosis, it's not just a fight. It is a catastrophic piece of evidence. Your husband sees your tears not as a sign of hurt, but as proof of your emotional instability. He sees your anger not as a reaction to his words, but as the choleric humor running rampant. You are, in his eyes, becoming the very picture of the hysterical woman the barber surgeon described. And here's a sad, ironic piece of trivia. Some of the very herbs used to treat you could have been contributing to your emotional state. Many of the herbal concoctions from this era were a wild mix of ingredients. Some, like valerian often used for its calming properties, could have paradoxical effects in some people. Others might have contained mild psychotropics that we can no longer identify. Is it possible the cure was actually exacerbating your symptoms? Historians who delve into the history of pharmacology suggest it's a distinct possibility. You were being medicated with a chemical wild card. The academic debate here is profound. Was the concept of the hysterical personality a genuine, if misguided, attempt to describe a set of observed behaviors, or was it a too-loud social control, a way to pathologize and dismiss any female behavior that deviated from the quiet, submissive ideal? Most contemporary scholars argue forcefully for the latter. It was a perfect feedback loop. The stress of being constantly scrutinized and bizarrely treated would naturally cause emotional distress, which was then used as proof of the underlying hysterical nature. The fight ends, as they all do, in a tense, unhappy silence. You lie awake on your straw mattress, your back to your husband, a chasm of cold air between you. The argument replays in your mind. But it's no longer just a memory of harsh words. It's a confirmation of your condition. Your husband's complaint, his accusation of your bitterness, has done more damage than any wandering organ could. It has planted a seed of doubt in your own mind. Are you sick? Or are you just difficult? Is your body the problem? Or is it you? The line between the two is dissolving, and you are left feeling utterly, terrifyingly alone. Your husband, now convinced that your ailment is beyond the skills of a common barber surgeon, decides to take a drastic and expensive step. He will consult a true physician, not a man who cuts hair and pulls teeth, but a university-trained doctor, a man who can read Latin and Greek, who has studied the ancient masters, and who understands the body not as a butcher does, but as a philosopher does. It takes a week to arrange. The physician lives in the nearby city, a bustling place of stone buildings and crowded markets that makes your village feel like a quiet backwater. The journey there is an ordeal in itself, rattling for hours in the back of a cart. When you arrive, you are ushered into a study that looks nothing like the barber surgeon's shop. This room is quiet, dark, and smells of old paper, beeswax, and leather. Books, thick and heavy, are stacked on shelves and on the desk. They are filled with words you cannot read, a secret, powerful knowledge that is close to you. The physician himself is an older man, thin and pale, with ink stains on his long fingers. He wears a dark, sober robe, the uniform of a scholar. He doesn't look at you with the practical, hands-on gaze of the barber surgeon. He looks at you as if you are a complex puzzle, a theorem to be solved. He listens patiently as your husband recounts the entire saga, the initial symptoms, the barber surgeon's diagnosis, the failed treatments with their foul and sweet smells. The physician nods slowly, his expression unchanging. He asks you a few questions, but they are not about how you feel. They are specific, diagnostic questions. Is a sensation of choking worse on a full moon? Do you have a ringing in your ears? Do you dream of falling? His questions are designed to fit your symptoms into the elaborate framework of his learning. He is not really listening to you. He is listening for the echoes of Galen, the Roman physician who refined and expanded upon the Hippocratic theories. For Galen, the wandering womb was a bit too simplistic. He proposed a new theory. Hysterical suffocation was caused by a retention of female seed or certain uterine fluids. This retention, he argued, would put fly, producing a toxic vapor that would rise through the body, affecting the heart, lungs, and, most critically, the brain. So in his more scientific view, your womb isn't literally going for a walk. It's more like a faulty still, brewing up poisonous fumes in your lower abdomen. A subtle distinction, perhaps, but one that the physician feels is very important. It's the difference between folk superstition and learned medicine. He eventually sits back in his high-backed chair, placing the tips of his fingers together. The diagnosis of the barber surgeon was crude. He announces, but not entirely incorrect in its essence. The seat of the malady is indeed the uterus. However, it is not merely wandering. It is dry and agitated. And it is retaining noxious humors whose vapors are ascending on poisoning the animal spirits of the brain. He says all this with the calm authority of a man stating a law of nature. He is not offering an opinion. He is revealing a truth. To you, it sounds like a more complicated version of the same terrifying story. Whether it's a wandering animal or a toxic brewery, the result is the same. A part of you is out of control and making you sick. This moment highlights a fascinating power dynamic in the history of medicine. The use of a specialized, inaccessible language, Latin and Greek, was a key tool for physicians to establish their authority. They could hold up a book by Galen, a text that was over 1,000 years old by this point, and present it as unassailable proof. You can't with a book you can treat. It creates an unbridgeable gap between the doctor's knowledge and the patient's experience. And here's a quirky little fact about university life at the time. Medical training was almost entirely theoretical. A student would spend years reading the ancient texts of Hippocrates, Galen, and Avicenna, actually touching or examining a patient, especially a female patient, was rare and often considered beneath the dignity of a learned physician. His diagnosis was based on the story he was told and how it fit the classical descriptions, not on a physical examination. He was treating the disease described in the book, not necessarily the person sitting in front of him. The academic debate here is about the relationship between this learned medicine and the folk medicine of healers and midwives. Were they two separate, competing systems? Or was there a constant trickle-down of ideas, where the complex theories of the university doctors were simplified and absorbed into popular belief, as seen with Elspeth and the barber surgeon? The evidence suggests it was mostly the latter. The core idea, the blame placed on the womb, remained the same, just dressed up in different jargon. The physician gives your husband a new list of instructions. His treatments are more refined, more complex. There will be dietary changes, no hot foods like garlic or onions, a new and even more expensive herbal concoction, and a recommendation for carefully timed sabotage bleeding to release the hot, toxic humors from your blood. You leave the city with a sense of weary resignation. You have been seen by the best. The highest medical authority has spoken, and he has confirmed your worst fears, just with longer words. The path ahead seems no clearer, just more complicated and more expensive. You are no longer just a simple woman with a strange ailment. You are now a case study, a living example of a disease described in an ancient book. Your future to be dictated by the ghost of a Roman doctor. Back in your village, the physician's diagnosis hangs in the air like a new kind of weather. It is dense, complex, and inescapable. His words, filtered through your husband's slightly confused retelling, paint a grimly detailed picture of your internal landscape. It's no longer a simple case of a lost and found organ. It is now a full-blown systemic failure. The doctor, with his charts and his ancient books, has provided a map for your malady. He has traced the journey of the noxious vapors as they rise from your agitated womb. He blames this invisible poison for everything. The hot flashes. That is the vapor heating your blood, the tightness in your throat, the vapor irritating the passageways of breath, your moments of irritability and sadness, the vapor clouding your intellect and disturbing the seat of your reason. Your entire being is being reinterpreted through this one, all-encompassing diagnosis. You are put on a strict diet. The physician has provided a long list of forbidden foods. No red meat, for it is too hot and bloody, and would only add fuel to the fire. No wine, for the same reason. No onions, garlic, or spicy herbs, as they are choleric in nature. Your diet is reduced to cool and moist foods, bland fish, cucumbers, lettuce, and watery fruits like melons. You are, in essence, being told to eat like a rabbit. The goal is to cool your entire system, to turn down the heat on the internal still that is brewing these toxic fumes. Every meal becomes a reminder of your sickness. The simple pleasure of a savory stew or a piece of roasted meat is gone, replaced by a regimen of flavorless, medicinal food. You feel weak, not from the illness, but from the cure. The physician's theory provides a convenient, one-size-fits-all explanation for every single thing that is wrong with you. One day, you trip over a loose floorboard. Your husband helps you up, his face grim. The vapors are affecting your balance, he says, with complete conviction. Another time, you forget where you placed your sewing needle. Your memory is clouded. He mutters, shaking his head. Your identity is being erased and replaced by the diagnosis. You are no longer just you. You are a collection of symptoms. A talking case of uterine fuel. This process, where every aspect of a person's life and personality is sucked into the vortex of a single diagnosis, is something modern sociologists of medicine study. It shows how a powerful medical label can redefine a person's entire existence, both to themselves and to others. One of the more peculiar historical details related to this is the sheer creativity doctors employed in tracing the womb's influence. They blamed it for an astonishing array of symptoms, eye ringing in the ears. The womb was pressing on an auditory nerve, a sudden urge to laugh or cry. The womb was tickling the diaphragm, a feeling of a lump in the stomach. The womb itself, sitting there like a loaf of bread. One famous physician from the 16th century, Emperor, even drew diagrams showing the womb with little claws, grabbing onto other organs as it climbed. It was the ultimate scapegoat for any symptom that wasn't immediately obvious. The perfect medical villain. The academic controversy surrounding this is not about the existence of these theories, but about their application. Did doctors truly believe one single organ could be responsible for such a vast and unrelated list of problems? Or was hysteria a diagnosis of last resort? A catch-all term for any female patient whose illness they simply couldn't figure out? The latter seems more likely. It was the ultimate I don't know, dressed up in the authoritative language of classical medicine. When you can't find the real cause, blame the womb. You feel trapped in the doctor's narrative. Your own experience is irrelevant. If you say, by dubbing tools, I feel a little better today, your husband might reply, the cucumber diet must be working. If you say, I feel worse, he will say, the vapors are strong today. There is no room for your own voice, your own interpretation. The map has been drawn by an expert, and you are merely the territory being described. You start to feel like a stranger in your own body. You place a hand on your abdomen. Is it really happening? Is there truly a toxic fog rising from that place? The power of suggestion is immense. The more you are told that a vapor is clouding your mind, the harder it becomes to think clearly. The more you are told your balance is affected, the more clumsily you seem to walk. The diagnosis is becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. The map isn't just describing the territory, it's changing it. And you are lost within it, with no compass to guide you out. The tightness in your chest and throat, the symptom that started this whole miserable journey, begins to change. Or perhaps, the way you perceive it changes. It's no longer just a tightness. It has become a distinct feeling of constriction. A sense that the very air you need is being squeezed out of you. With a hot flesh it's now. It's often accompanied by a dizzying spell that leaves you gasping, your heart hammering against your ribs. You feel as if you are breathing through a thick, wet cloth. You try to tell your husband that this is a new and frightening sensation, but to him, it's not new at all. It's merely the next logical stage on the physician's map. The vapors are reaching your lungs, he says, with the grim certainty of a man who trusts his expert. It is the suffocation the doctor warned of. Suffocation. The word itself is terrifying. It's an active, violent word. It implies a struggle. But this isn't the suffocation of a hand over your mouth or a rope around your neck. This is an internal betrayal. The doctor has given it a grand and terrifying name. A name that echoes down from the ancient Greek texts. Hysteria. It translates, quite literally, to hysterical suffocation or, more chillingly, suffocation of the mother. The very name of the diagnosis frames your womb as an aggressor, an internal enemy that is actively trying to extinguish your life. It's not just a restless animal anymore, it's a murderer. The physician explained it clearly. The toxic uterine vapors rise and clog the delicate vessels of the lungs and heart, preventing the vital spirit or pneuma from circulating. In their view, breathing wasn't just about air. It was about circulating an essential life force, and your womb was cutting off the supply. This idea creates a profound psychological terror. Every short breath, every dizzy spell, becomes a brush with death. You start to become hyper-aware of your own breathing. Is it too shallow, too fast, too slow? The anxiety itself creates a feedback loop, making your breathing more erratic, which in turn fuels the fear that you are, in fact, suffocating. You are experiencing what modern medicine would call a panic attack, brought on by a combination of physiological symptoms, the hot flash, and extreme psychological distress. But in your world, it is a physical assault from within. You are not alone in this terror. The suffocation of the mother was considered a real and potentially fatal crisis. Medical literature is filled with dramatic accounts of women on the verge of death, their breath failing, their bodies convulsing, only to be saved at the last moment by a doctor's intervention. These accounts, read aloud in universities and shared among physicians, solidified the disease's reputation as a serious and life-threatening condition. And here we find one of the most bizarre and frankly disturbing cures ever prescribed for this condition. Well, not for the faint of heart. It is a matter of historical record. For a woman in the midst of a full-blown hysterical suffocation, some physicians, including the great Galen, recommended forceful and immediate stimulation of the pelvic region. The logic, as grotesque as it sounds, was that a powerful arousal would moisten and relax the wound, breaking the fit and causing the organ to immediately retreat. This was sometimes performed by a physician, but more often prescribed to the husband as an emergency medical procedure. A startlingly intimate prescription from a doctor. The academic debate on this point is intense. Some historians view this as a clear example of the medical establishment exerting control over female bodies and sexuality under the guise of therapy. Others argue for a more charitable interpretation, suggesting that physicians, operating within their flawed understanding of anatomy, genuinely believed this was a life-saving technique, a sort of human defibrillator for the womb. The truth is likely somewhere in the murky middle, a mixture of genuine intent and systemic, unconscious bias. You, thankfully, are not subjected to this particular cure. Your episodes are frightening but brief, but the fear remains. You become afraid of being alone, terrified that a fit of suffocation will overtake you when no one is there to help. The four walls of your home, once a sanctuary, now feel like a potential tomb. You lie awake at night, listening to the sound of your own breath, praying that it continues. The very source of life, the organ that is supposed to create new life, has been twisted by the theories of learned men into a weapon pointed at your own throat. It has been given a name, a motive, and a method, and as you gasp for air in the dark, you feel completely and utterly at its mercy. In the midst of your increasingly grim regimen of diets and fears, your husband's and Elspeth pays you a visit. She comes bearing not a lecture, but a small cloth bag. She has heard from your husband about the city physician's complicated diagnosis, and she clicks her tongue in a way that is both sympathetic and a little dismissive of all that fancy book learning. Too many words, she mutters, sitting down beside you. They get lost in their Latin and forget to look at what's right in front of them. She believes in the wandering womb, of course, but her approach is more practical, rooted in a tradition of folk wisdom that runs parallel to the physician's scholarly medicine. She tells you she has been thinking about your condition. The city doctor may talk of vapors, but she still believes the core of the problem is a dry and barren womb. The mother is not just restless, she says, lowering her voice. It is lonely. It needs the promise of a child to soothe it. Before you can protest that this is a matter between you and your husband and God, she opens the cloth bag. Inside is a small, wriggling creature. It's a weasel. It has beady black eyes, a long, slinky body, and it lets out a series of nervous, jittering sounds. You recoil, startled. What on earth is she doing with a weasel? Elspeth holds it firmly, stroking its back to calm it. This is an old test, she explains, her face perfectly serious. A way to see if the womb is still receptive, if it is open and ready for a child. And then she describes one of the most astonishingly strange diagnostic procedures in the entire history of medicine. She tells you that the way to test a woman's fertility is to place a weasel, or sometimes just its potent scent, near her. The theory, as recorded in several medieval medical and folk manuscripts, was that a woman's body had a direct, open channel from her lower regions all the way to her nose and mouth. If her womb was open and fertile, the weasel's scent would travel up this internal highway and she would be able to smell it or taste it in her mouth. If the passage was blocked, signifying infertility, she would smell nothing. You stare at her, then at the squirming animal, in stunned silence. The idea is so profoundly, breathtakingly bizarre. It almost short-circuits your fear. You are to be sniff-tested by a weasel. This is not a joke. This belief, known as the scent test, appears in various forms in historical sources. Sometimes it wasn't a weasel, but a clove of garlic or a strongly scented fumigation. The principle was the same. It was a genuine, if utterly nonsensical, attempt to understand the hidden workings of fertility. It stemmed from a complete lack of understanding of anatomy, imagining the female torso not as a space filled with distinct, separate organs, but as a series of interconnected tubes and porous membranes. Why a weasel, specifically? The animal had a strange and powerful place in the folklore of the time. According to one popular legend, weasels were believed to conceive their young through the ear and give birth through the mouth. This oral procreation myth, as absurd as it sounds, linked the weasel directly to the idea of unconventional passages within the body, making it the perfect symbolic animal for this test. It's a fascinating, if slightly horrifying, example of how folklore and medicine could intertwine. The academic debate here isn't about the existence of the test. It's well documented. The question is how widespread it was. Was this a common procedure performed by village healers everywhere? Or was it a rare and outlandish practice that was simply written down a few times and thus preserved for posterity? It's impossible to know for sure, but it speaks to a world where the lines between magic, theology, and symbolism were hopelessly blurred. You, thankfully, refused the test. You summon a strength you didn't know you had until Elspeth, firmly but politely, that you will not have a weasel shoved in your face. Your refusal surprises her, and perhaps even you. It is a small act of rebellion, a moment where you choose your own dignity over the bizarre prescriptions of others. Elspeth looks a little disappointed, but she doesn't push. She sighs, puts the disgruntled weasel back in its bag, and pets your hand. As you wish, child. But the problem remains. A dry field must be watered. She leaves, taking her strange diagnostic tool with her. The encounter, as unsettling as it was, has a curious effect on you. It's so outlandish, so far beyond the pale of reason, that it cracks the grim facade of the physician's diagnosis. For a moment, you see the whole enterprise for what it is, a group of people, from learned doctors to village healers, making wild, elaborate guesses about something they do not understand. They are all just telling stories about the inside of your body, and the story with the weasel in it is so ridiculous that it makes you question the credibility of all the other stories. 2. The refusal of the weasel test marks a subtle shift in your household. It was a small act of defiance, but it seems to have drained the last of your husband's patience for folk remedies and alternative opinions. He decides that the only path forward is to follow the city physician's advice to the letter, and the physician, in addition to the diet and the foul-tasting medicine, had offered one primary, overarching prescription. It was the same advice doctors had been giving for this condition for nearly 2,000 years. The prescription was simple: marriage, or more specifically, the regular, vigorous execution of marital duties. One evening, your husband sits down with you. He doesn't look angry anymore, just weary and determined. He explains the doctor's logic, as it was explained to him. The core of your problem, according to the great Hippocrates, Plato, and Galen, was a dry, barren, and underutilized womb. It was an organ with a purpose, and when that purpose was not fulfilled, it became distressed. It was like a mill without grain to grind, or a field left fallow for too long. It grew restless and hot. The cure, therefore, was to give the organ what it wanted, according to the physician. Regular marital relations would water the womb, calming its dryness, and a potential pregnancy would anchor it, giving it a job to do and weighing it down so it could no longer wander or produce noxious vapors. You listen to this clinical, detached explanation of the most intimate part of your life, and you feel a profound sense of alienation. Your relationship, your physical union with your husband, is being rebranded as a medical treatment. It is not about affection, or partnership, or even simple pleasure. It is a prescription, like a dose of medicine. You are to engage in intimacy not out of desire, but for therapeutic purposes. It's a strange and deeply uncomfortable reframing of your marriage. This prescription was the number one go-to treatment for hysteria for centuries. It was considered the most natural and effective cure. Medical texts are unequivocal on this point. For a young, unmarried girl showing signs of hysteria, the prescription was immediate marriage. For a married woman, it was more frequent intimacy. For a widow, it was remarriage. The social and medical advice were perfectly and conveniently aligned. This created an impossible situation for many women. A woman who was not interested in her husband, or who found the marital act unpleasant, had no recourse. To refuse was not just a matter of disobeying her husband. It was a matter of refusing her medical treatment. It was seen as actively choosing to remain ill, indulging her own sickness. Her lack of desire wasn't a valid feeling. It was a symptom of her condition, a sign of her contrary and hysterical nature. And here we find a truly peculiar little detail in the historical record. Some physicians took this theory to its logical extreme. They believed that the womb could not only be calmed by the marital act, but that it could also, in a way, taste the seed, and that this would have a powerful, soothing effect. There are even texts that describe the womb as leaping with joy upon receiving it. This highly anthropomorphized view of the organ gave it an almost conscious desire, turning a biological process into a miniature domestic drama happening inside a woman's pelvis. The academic debate here is a significant one. Was this prescription a genuine, albeit deeply flawed, medical belief, or was it a form of social engineering? A way for a patriarchal society to enforce female submission and reproductive duty under the banner of health and science. Many feminist historians argue compellingly that it was, at its core, a way to pathologize female disinterest or autonomy. By defining the healthy woman as a reproductively active one, the medical establishment created a powerful tool to enforce social norms. You are now caught in this web. Your husband's advances are no longer just the advances of a husband. They carry the weight of a doctor's orders. There is a new pressure, a new sense of obligation. The act itself becomes a strange, joyless chore, a box to be ticked on the long list of your supposed cures. You feel like a patient being administered a dose of medicine. And the intimacy of your marriage bed becomes a cool, clinical space. And, of course, it doesn't work. The hot flushes do not cease. The anxiety does not abate. The tightness in your throat still comes and goes. The fundamental, biological reality of your menopause is utterly unaffected by this prescribed performance of marital duty. The failure of this ultimate, most praised cure is the most damning failure of all. If even this, the most ancient and trusted of remedies, does not work, then something must be very wrong. Not with the medicine, but with you. The physician had said this would work. The fact that it hasn't can only mean one thing. Your case is more stubborn, more deeply rooted than he first thought. And this failure opens the door to a much darker and more terrifying explanation. Weeks turn into a month, then two. Your life has become a monotonous cycle of failed cures. You eat your bland, cooling foods. You dutifully perform the remedy of the marriage bed. You try to suppress the waves of heat and the feelings of suffocation, but they continue their relentless rhythm. Indifferent to your efforts, the situation has reached a dead end. The entire arsenal of medieval medicine, from the folksy wisdom of Elspeth to the learned theories of the city physician, has been deployed against your condition, and all of it has failed. This failure creates a vacuum. The medical explanation, which had seemed so solid and authoritative, is now starting to look flimsy. It hasn't provided a cure, so it must not be the whole truth. In the minds of your husband and the small community around you, a new and dangerous question begins to form. If a doctor cannot cure it, is it truly a disease of the body? One afternoon, the physician pays a follow-up visit. It's a rare and expensive honor, arranged by your increasingly desperate husband. The doctor comes to your small home, his fine robes looking out of place against the rough-hewn wood and smoky air. He listens to the report. No improvement. He observes you, his gaze sharp and analytical. He sees your fatigue, your persistent anxiety, the way you flinch when your husband speaks. He strokes his chin, and for the first time, a shadow of doubt seems to cross his face. Not doubt in his own theories, but doubt about the nature of your case. He has prescribed the correct treatments for a hysterical condition rooted in the womb. The fact that they have not worked suggests that the root of the problem may lie elsewhere. The obstinacy of this affliction is remarkable, he says slowly, choosing his words with care. The humors are rebellious, and the womb refuses to be pacified. When a natural malady shows such unnatural resistance to a proper cure, a physician must consider unnatural causes. Unnatural causes. The phrase drops into the quiet room like a stone. It's a coded language, a careful way of stepping back from the problem and handing it over to another authority. He is a doctor of the body. The body is the realm of nature, of humors and organs. But if the cause is unnatural, it belongs to a different jurisdiction. It belongs to the realm of the soul. It belongs to the church. This was a critical turning point in the diagnosis of many intractable illnesses during this period, when medicine reached the limits of its understanding and effectiveness. The explanation often shifted from the medical to the theological. A disease that was resistant to treatment could be interpreted as a sign of divine punishment for a hidden sin, or, more terrifyingly, as evidence of demonic influence or witchcraft. The physician is, in essence, washing his hands of you. He has done all he can. He cannot be seen to fail. Therefore, the failure must not be his. The problem must be a spiritual one, beyond his purview. He is protecting his professional reputation by subtly shifting the blame onto a plane where he holds no responsibility. A strange and little-known aspect of this is that physicians and priests sometimes had a competitive relationship. Both were authorities on the human condition, one on the body, the other on the soul, but the line between the two was often blurry. Some religious texts accused physicians of being too worldly, of ignoring the spiritual causes of disease. Conversely, some physicians were wary of the church's influence, saying it as superstitious. However, in a case like yours, a collaboration was often the result. The doctor would diagnose the physical symptoms, and if they proved incurable, the priest would be called in to investigate the spiritual ones. The academic question here is a sensitive one. How complicit were physicians in the witch hunts that would later sweep through Europe? Some scholars argue that by creating a medical framework that identified women as inherently unstable, irrational, and prone to bizarre behaviors, doctors inadvertently laid the groundwork. Their diagnosis of hysteria provided a supposedly scientific rationale for why a woman might be susceptible to the devil. Other historians argue this is an overstatement, and that most physicians were genuinely trying to heal, not to persecute. It remains a deeply contentious part of medical history. The physician stands to leave. He offers no new medicines, no new dietary advice. Instead, he gives your husband one final, chilling recommendation. You should speak with your priest, he says, his voice slow. Perhaps there is a matter of the soul here that is blocking the body's path to healing. Sometimes, prayer and penance are the strongest medicines. He leaves. The air in the room feels colder, heavier. The word natural echoes in the silence. The problem is no longer a wandering room or toxic vapors. The problem is you, your soul, your faith. The entire focus has shifted from your belly to your spirit. You have been discharged from the hospital of medicine and admitted to the courtroom of theology. And you know, with a certainty that chills you to the bone, that the priest's questions will be far more dangerous than the doctor's. Following the physician's solemn advice feels like a final, desperate appeal. Your husband, a man who fears God in a simple, unquestioning way, goes to speak with Father Michael, the parish priest. He doesn't have to go far. The church, a small, cold stone building, is the center of your village, its bell marking the hours of your life. A few days later, Father Michael appears at your door. He is not a frightening man. He is middle-aged, with a kind, if often weary, face. He has baptized your neighbor's children and spoken the final rites over their parents. He is a familiar, steady presence in your life. But today, his visit feels different. He is not here for a simple blessing or a neighborly chat. He is here on a mission. He is an investigator of the soul. He comes inside, bringing the faint, sweet smell of incense and old stone with him. He sits where the doctor sat, but his presence fills the room in a different way. The doctor looked at you like a puzzle. The priest looks at you like a lost sheep, but one that might have been consorting with wolves. His gaze is soft, but his questions are sharp, probing. He is not interested in your hot flashes or the feeling of suffocation. He wants to know about your spiritual health. Have you been faithful in your prayers, my child? He begins, his voice gentle. Yes, Father. Have you harbored envy in your heart for your neighbors? No, Father, I don't think so. Have you had thoughts of anger or bitterness towards your husband, towards God for your affliction? This last question hits you hard. Of course you've had thoughts of anger and bitterness. You have been miserable for months. You have been angry at the pain, at the failed cures, at your husband's frustration. You have felt a deep, biting resentment. To deny it would be a lie. You hesitate, and in your hesitation, he sees a confession. Ah, he says softly, a look of sad understanding on his face. An angry heart is a dangerous thing. It is an unguarded gate. The priest's framework is entirely different from the doctor's, yet it arrives at a troubling similar conclusion. The doctor saw your anger as a symptom of excess yellow bile, a humoral imbalance. The priest sees it as a sin, a moral failing, a weakness of character that leaves your soul vulnerable. Both interpretations take your legitimate emotional response to a difficult situation and pathologize it, one medically, the other theologically. He begins to reframe your entire illness. The wandering woman, the noxious vapors were the doctor's clumsy, worldly terms for what is, in truth, a spiritual malady. Your body is not sick, he explains. Your soul is. The physical symptoms, he suggests, are merely an outward manifestation of an inner turmoil. They are a sign that your spiritual defenses are weak. This shift from a medical to a spiritual diagnosis was a common path for illnesses that were chronic, female-specific, and poorly understood. It was a way for the society to make sense of what seemed nonsensical, and it placed the burden of the illness squarely on the patient's moral character. A strange and fascinating historical tidbit is that in some theological treatises of the time, the womb itself was seen as having a sort of moral character, because it was the vessel of original sin, passed down from Eve. It was considered an inherently unruly, untrustworthy organ, prone to temptations of the flesh. So, in a way, the priest and the doctor were looking at the same organ, but one saw a mischievous animal, and the other saw a tiny, fleshy seat of sin. The academic debate here focuses on the intersection of medicine and religion. Were priests actively undermining medical authority, or were they working in tandem with it? The evidence suggests that, for the most part, it was a partnership. The physician would diagnose the physical container, and the priest would diagnose the spiritual contents. When one failed, the other took over. This created a powerful, two-pronged system of authority that left a person, particularly a woman, with very little room to maneuver. Her body and soul were both under intense scrutiny. Father Michael leans forward, his expression grave. You must understand, he says, that when a soul is weakened by sin, by anger or despair, it creates an opening. It is like leaving the door of your house unlatched at night. You invite intruders. Intruders, He doesn't say the word demon. Not yet. He is a careful man. But the implication is as clear as the cross hanging around his neck. The failure of medicine was not just a failure. It was a sign. A sign that the battle for your health was not being fought in the realm of herbs and humus. It was being fought in the invisible world of angels and demons. Then right now, you are losing. He leaves you with instructions for prayer, for penance. You are to say 10 Hail Marys every hour. You are to fast on Fridays. You are to examine your conscience for every flicker of anger or despair and confess it immediately. Your life, already constrained by a strict medical regimen, is now being hemmed in by an equally strict spiritual one. The goal is no longer to cool your humors or lure your womb home. The goal is to fortify your soul, to lock the doors and bar the windows against the darkness outside. But the priest's words have planted a new and terrible fear in your heart. What if it's already too late? What if the intruder is already inside? The priest's words haunt you more than any medical diagnosis ever could. The idea of an unguarded gate transforms your inner world into a place of terrifying vulnerability. Your own emotions, a flash of anger, a moment of despair, are no longer just feelings. They are breaches in your spiritual wall. Every time you feel a surge of frustration at your condition, a new fear immediately follows. Did I just unlock the door? This is the moment the narrative takes its darkest turn. The theory of the wandering womb has performed its final, terrible function. It has served as a bridge, leading you from the world of medicine to the world of theology, and now it is leading you to the doorstep of demonology. Father Michael, in his subsequent visits, becomes more explicit. He explains the logic as a priest would. The devil, he says, is a cunning opportunist. He cannot simply possess a strong and faithful soul. He must find a weakness, a crack to slip through. And for centuries, theologians and demonologists had argued that women, by their very nature, were more susceptible to these weaknesses. And what, he asks, is the greatest source of a woman's weakness and irrationality? He doesn't even have to say the word. Everyone knows the answer, from the learned physician to the simple farmer. It's her womb. Here, the two streams of thought converge into a single, toxic river. The medical theory of the wandering womb provides the scientific proof for the theological prejudice. The doctor says your womb is wandering, blocking the higher faculties and causing emotional chaos. The priest takes this diagnosis and adds a terrifying new layer. This state of hysteria, this mental and emotional chaos, doesn't just make you sick. It makes you an ideal target for demonic influence. Your mind, already confused and blocked by your own anatomy, cannot effectively fight off a spiritual attack. It's like trying to fight an intruder while being half asleep and dizzy. The womb, the very organ that was supposed to be the source of life and fertility, has now been fully twisted into a liability. It is a built-in vulnerability, a fifth column within your own body, ready to betray you to the forces of darkness. Your own biology is being presented as a pre-existing condition for damnation. This connection between hysteria and demonic possession was not a fringe idea. It was a mainstream belief, discussed and debated by the highest theological minds of the age. They reasoned that a demon, being a spirit, could not directly control a physical body. Instead, it would work through the body's existing systems. It would agitate the humus, particularly the black by love melancholy and the yellow by love chola, to create despair and anger. It would work upon the womb, the body's most volatile and emotional organ, stirring it up to create the kind of mental fog and confusion that would make a soul ripe for the picking. And here we come across a truly strange and chilling detail from the demonological texts of the time. Some writers claimed that a demon could literally ride the ascending womb, using its journey through the body as a vehicle to reach the heart and brain. The wandering womb was not just a symbol of chaos, it was a demonic chariot. This transformed your hot flashes and feelings of suffocation from mere symptoms into the physical sensation of a supernatural assault. The scholarly debate on this topic is intense. Did the belief in a wandering womb cause the association between women and witchcraft? Or did a pre-existing misogyny simply use the medical theory as a convenient justification? Most historians believe it was the latter. The idea of women as spiritually weaker and more carnal than men existed long before Plato. The wandering womb theory simply provided a handy, pseudo-scientific-looking hook on which to hang these ancient prejudices. It medicalized misogyny, giving it the sheen of intellectual respectability. You are now living in a state of constant, heightened vigilance. You scrutinize every thought, every feeling. Is this sadness my own? Or is it a demonic whisper? Is this flash of anger a product of my frustrated spirit? Or is it the devil fanning the flames of my choleric humor? You can no longer trust your own mind. You are a suspect in the investigation of your own soul. The priest instructs you in methods of spiritual defense. You hang crucifixes and sprinkle holy water. You recite prayers until your throat is raw. But these actions, meant to bring comfort, only increase your sense of being under siege. They are a constant reminder of the invisible enemy you are supposed to be fighting. The unguarded gate is the central metaphor now, but the more you focus on it, the more you feel it has already been breached. The priest has convinced you that your mind is a fortress with a traitor inside the walls. The enemy isn't at the gate anymore. He's in the courtyard, and he got there by riding the back of your own wandering, traitorous womb. The shift in your diagnosis from sick to spiritually vulnerable doesn't stay within the walls of your home. Secrets, especially frightening ones, have a way of seeping out into the village air like smoke. Your husband, in his fear and frustration, confides in a friend at the tavern. The priest, in a sermon about the wiles of the devil, makes a veiled but pointed reference to the dangers of a troubled spirit in their very own parish. The whispers begin. At first, it's a subtle change. When you go to the market, the usual greetings from your neighbors are a little more hesitant. Their smiles don't quite reach their eyes. The friendly chatter at the well quiets down as you approach. You feel their gazes on your back as you walk away. The sympathy they once had for your illness is slowly being replaced by something else. A mixture of pity and fear. You are no longer just the woman with the strange sickness. You are the woman the priest is praying for, and in a small, tight-knit community, that kind of special attention is not a good thing. Elspeth, your husband's aunt, stops visiting. Perhaps she fears the unnatural cause the physician spoke of, or perhaps she is simply afraid of being associated with someone who has fallen under such a dark cloud of suspicion. Her absence is a painful blow. Her folk wisdom, as bizarre as the weasel test was, had at least been offered with a kind of rough affection. Now, that affection is gone, replaced by a prudent silence. The children in the village, who once played freely in the muddy street, now fall quiet and edge away when you pass. One day, you hear one of them whisper a word to another, a word you have only ever heard spoken in hushed and fearful tones. The word is witch. The child doesn't say it to you. Not directly, it's just a word floating on the air. But it finds its mark. It strikes you with the force of a physical blow. This is how social ostracism works. It's not a formal declaration. It's 1,000 tiny cuts. It's the averted gaze, the hushed conversation, the sudden space that clears around you. Your community, the very fabric of your social existence, is beginning to unravel. You are being isolated, quarantined, not because you are contagious in a medical sense, but because your spiritual trouble is seen as a potential threat to the health of the entire community. This process was a common feature of the prelude to the Great Witch Hunts. Before any formal accusation was made, a person was often subjected to a period of informal social vetting. Their reputation would be slowly dismantled by gossip and suspicion. Any past misfortunes that had befallen a neighbor, a tail that went dry, a batch of bread that failed to rise, might be re-examined in this new, sinister light. Was it just bad luck? Or was it your anger, your bitterness, that had caused it? And here's a sad, peculiar fact of village life. This process was often driven by other women, while the formal accusers and judges were men. The initial whispers and accusations often originated from the victim's female neighbors. It was a tragic dynamic, fueled by a combination of genuine fear, jealousy, and the desire to deflect suspicion from oneself. By pointing a finger at you, they were implicitly stating that they were not like you. They were the healthy, pious ones. The academic debate on this point is crucial. Why did communities turn on their own members? Some historians point to social and economic pressures. The person targeted was often someone who was already marginalized, an elderly widow, a woman with a sharp tongue, or like you, someone suffering from a chronic, unexplained illness. Accusing them could be a way of finding a scapegoat for the community's anxieties, whether it was a bad harvest, a plague, or just a general sense of unease. Your illness has made you a lightning rod for all the fears of your neighbors. You feel the change in every interaction. The baker gives you your bread without meeting your eye. The man who sells firewood seems to find a sudden, urgent task to do when he sees you coming. You are becoming a ghost in your own village, a person people look through rather than at. The irony is crushing. The doctors and the priest, in their attempts to cure you, have inflicted a far deeper wound. They have severed your connection to your community. Your physical symptoms, the hot flashes and the anxiety, are now almost secondary to the pain of the social isolation. You are alone, adrift in a sea of suspicion, and the whispers, like a rising tide, are getting louder every day, threatening to pull you under for good. You are now trapped. It's a feeling that has been building for months, but now it has solidified into a cold, hard reality. The trap is not made of wood or iron. It's made of words, of theories, of whispers. And the most terrifying part is that the bait in this trap, the evidence being used against you, is your own body. Every involuntary action is now a potential exhibit for the prosecution. If a hot flash makes you gasp and clutch your chest, it is not a menopausal symptom. It is a sign that your womb is suffocating you, or that a demon is tormenting you. If your anxiety makes your hands tremble, it is not a sign of fear. It is a sign of a choleric humor or a guilty conscience. If you cry out of sheer frustration and despair, your tears are not a sign of sadness. They are proof of your hysterical and emotionally volatile nature. Your body has become a prison, and its own natural processes have been turned into the prison guards. You can't stop the hot flashes. You can't command your frayed nerves to be calm. You try to control your expressions, to keep your face a blank, unreadable mask. You try to move slowly, deliberately, to avoid any sudden gesture that could be misinterpreted. You are constantly policing yourself, trying to perform the role of a well person. But the performance is exhausting, and your own biology keeps betraying you. This experience, this feeling of being alienated from one's own body, is a concept that philosophers and sociologists would later call alienation. You are experiencing a profound disconnect from your physical self. Your body is no longer a part of you. It is on it, a separate, unruly entity that is causing all this trouble. It has been defined by others as sick, rebellious, and spiritually weak, and you are beginning to believe it yourself. You look at your own hands and wonder what they might do without your consent. You listen to your own breath at night, wondering if it will stop. The trust between your mind and your body has been completely shattered. This idea of the body as betrayer was particularly potent for women in the medieval and early modern periods. Male bodies were seen as the standard, the norm. They were generally considered to be stronger, more stable, and more rational. The female body, with its mysterious cycles of menstruation and childbirth, was seen as inherently unstable, wetter, colder, and more prone to chaos. It was, in the words of one historian, a leaky vessel, always threatening to spill over into sickness or madness. A truly strange but illustrative historical detail comes from the world of art. In some medieval medical illustrations, the female anatomy is drawn almost as a parody of the male. The uterus is sometimes depicted as an inverted scrotum, and the whole system is shown as a kind of flawed, inside-out version of the male standard. This wasn't just bad anatomy. It was a visual representation of a philosophical belief that the female body was a deviation from the perfect male form. The academic controversy here is about the agency of the women themselves. Were they purely passive victims of these beliefs? Or did they find ways to resist? Some historians argue that some women may have used the diagnosis of hysteria. By performing the symptoms, they could potentially avoid unwanted marital duties or gain a measure of attention and control in a world where they had very little power. This is a controversial idea, as it risks blaming the victim. But it acknowledges that women were not just blank slates upon which doctors and priests wrote their theories. They were active, thinking beings trying to navigate an impossible system. For you, however, this is not a strategy. It is a nightmare from which you cannot wake up. You feel the walls of the prison closing in. The prison is your home, which you are now afraid to leave. The prison is your village, which now sees you as a threat. But the deepest, most inescapable prison is your own skin. You cannot flee from your own body. You cannot escape the symptoms that are being used to condemn you. You are caught in a perfect, unbreakable loop. The stress of your situation creates real, physical symptoms of anxiety. These symptoms are then interpreted as proof of your medical and spiritual sickness. This interpretation increases the suspicion and isolation you face, which in turn increases your stress, which creates more symptoms. It is a vicious, self-perpetuating cycle, and you are at its center, spinning. You are trapped not by what you have done, but by what you are. A woman whose body has been turned into a witness for the prosecution. The whispers in the village are no longer just formless gossip. They are beginning to coalesce around a new, more solid intellectual framework, a terrifying instruction manual for identifying and prosecuting people like you. You don't see the book itself. You are a woman of a small village. You cannot read. And even if you could, this book is written in Latin, the language of priests and scholars. But its ideas, its poison, are filtering down into the sermons and the tavern talk. The book is called the Malleus Maleficama, the Hammer of Witches. Written in the late 15th century by the German inquisitors, this book would become one of the most infamous and destructive texts in European history. It is not a book of folklore or superstition. It presents itself as a rigorous, scholarly, and legal manual. It is a guide for hunting, prosecuting, and convicting witches. And it does so with the full weight of theological and legal authority. The Malleus Maleficama is not subtle. Its very first section sets out to prove, with painstaking logic, that witchcraft is real, that is a heresy, and that to deny its existence is itself a form of heresy. But its most venomous and influential arguments are reserved for one particular topic: why women, far more than men, are prone to becoming witches. The authors of the Hammer draw on every available source of misogyny from the ancient and medieval world. They quote the Bible, the Church Fathers, and classical philosophers, all to build their case. They argue that women are more credulous, more impressionable, and more carnal than men. And then, they bring in the medicine. They explicitly reference the wandering womb. The book argues that women are physically and mentally unstable because of their defective biology. The womb, that restless and insatiable organ, is named as a primary source of their weakness. The authors describe women as being ruled by their animal appetites, which are centered in the uterus. This makes them susceptible to the devil's promises of sensual pleasure. Your hot flushes, your mood swings, your anxiety, the very symptoms that the physician diagnosed as hysteria, are presented in this book as the classic signs of a woman who is consorting with demons. The medical diagnosis has become a key piece of evidence for a spiritual crime. The book is filled with lurid and detailed stories, presented as factual case studies. It describes how witches can cause impotence, steal men's virility, create storms, and kill infants with a glance. It turns neighborly disputes and personal misfortunes into acts of deliberate, supernatural malice. And here we find a truly bizarre and specific detail that highlights the book's obsession with female anatomy. The authors of the Meluas spend a significant amount of time on the idea that witches could, through illusion, make it appear as if they had removed a man's reproductive organs and hidden them in a bird's nest or a box. They even provide a supposed remedy for this, told from a case study, which involves pleading with the witch to return the stolen property. This obsessive focus on the theft of male virility reveals a deep-seated anxiety about female power and its perceived threat to male identity and potency. The academic debate about the Meluas Maleficum is vast. For a long time, it was seen as the single, authoritative text that single-handedly caused the European witch craze. More recent scholarship has revised this view, showing that the witch hunts were a complex phenomenon with many causes, and that the Meluas was not as universally accepted by legal authorities as once thought. Some judges and theologians found its methods and reasoning to be extreme and unreliable. However, there is no denying its immense influence. It was a bestseller. It provided a ready-made, easy-to-understand handbook for persecution, and its ideas seeped into the popular imagination, providing a terrifying script for communities to follow. You don't know the name of the book, but you feel its shadow. You hear its logic in the priest's increasingly stern warnings. You see its effects in the fear on your neighbors' faces. The book has provided a name and a narrative for what is happening to you. It has taken the vague cloud of suspicion and sharpened it into a spear. The wandering womb theory was the kindling. The gossip and fear were the sparks. But the Meluas Maleficum is the wind that is fanning it all into a raging fire, and you are standing right in its path. The air has grown thick with unspoken accusations. The whispers have almost entirely replaced normal conversation. You now face a terrifying and impossible choice, a silent negotiation for your own survival. On one side is the diagnosis of the physician. You are hysterical, a sick woman whose body is in chaos. On the other side is the growing suspicion fueled by the priest and the Meluas Maleficum. You are a witch, sick or evil, mad or malevolent. Those are your only two options. You find yourself desperately, strategically, trying to cling to the diagnosis of hysteria. It is a humiliating, pathologizing label. It reduces you to a collection of symptoms and faulty parts. It frames you as irrational and untrustworthy. But it is, by a very slim margin, the lesser of two evils. To be seen as hysterical is to be seen as a patient, someone to be pitied, perhaps confined, but ultimately treated. To be seen as a witch is to be seen as a criminal, a heretic, an enemy of God and man. The cure for hysteria is a foul-tasting potion. The cure for witchcraft is fire. So you begin to perform the role of the hysteric. When your husband asks how you are, you don't say "I feel afraid" or "I feel isolated." You say, "The vapors are strong today." You use the language of the physician. You medicalize your own despair because it is safer than having it spiritualized. You are collaborating in the erasure of your own true feelings in a desperate act of self-preservation. You lean into the image of the frail, sick woman. You emphasize your weakness, your confusion. It is a horrifying performance. You are essentially arguing for your own incompetence, your own lack of agency. "I am not powerful enough to be a witch," your performance says. "I am just a poor, sick woman whose own body has betrayed her. I am not a monster. I am just broken." This choice, this terrible dilemma, was the reality for many women in this period. The line between a medical diagnosis and a criminal accusation was incredibly thin, and it could be crossed with terrifying speed. A woman who complained of strange pains could be seen as sick. But if her neighbor's cow then died, her pains could be reinterpreted as the physical toll of her witchcraft. It all depended on the interpretation of others. Here we uncover a small but poignant historical detail: the swimming test. This was a common ordeal used to identify witches, based on the belief that water, being a pure element used in baptism, would reject a witch. The accused would be bound and thrown into a river or lake. If she floated, she was a witch rejected by the holy water. If she signed, she was innocent. Of course. The innocent verdict often came at the cost of the accused drowning. This ordeal is a perfect, brutal metaphor for your choice. You can sink into the diagnosis of the helpless hysteric, or you can be saved for the pyre by the accusation of witchcraft. Both options lead to a kind of death, one social and psychological, the other literal and final. The academic debate here revolves around the concept of social negotiation. Did women in this position understand the choice they were making? Were they consciously performing sickness to avoid a worse fate? Historians like Lionel Roper have done groundbreaking work analyzing the records of witch trials, and they suggest that women were often highly aware of the roles they were being forced to play. They would try to shape the narrative, to present themselves in the most sympathetic light possible, even if it meant accepting a demeaning and pathologizing label. It was a desperate gambit in a high-stakes game they could not win. Your husband, caught in the middle, seems to favor the medical explanation. It is less terrifying, less shameful. He prefers a sick wife to a damned one. He encourages your performance of hysteria, reminding you to take your useless medicine, asking about your vapors. He too is collaborating in this charade, trying to keep the darker explanation at bay. But the choice is not entirely yours to make. Your sanity is being put to a village vote. Every day, you feel the tide of opinion shifting. A good day, when your symptoms are mild, might turn you a few sympathetic glances. You are the poor sick woman. A bad day, when a wave of anxiety makes you sharp-tongued, might turn you glares of suspicion. You are the angry, bitter woman. You are walking a tightrope, and the winds of public opinion, fickle and cruel, threaten to blow you off at any moment. You are fighting for the right to be called crazy, because the alternative is too terrible to contemplate. Let's take a step back now. Let's leave you for a moment, trembling on the tightrope of your impossible choice, and float up high above your small, smoky village. Let's drift through time, watching as the centuries turn. Because this story, the story of the wandering room, doesn't end with you. It is a ghost. A persistent spectre that will haunt the halls of medicine for another 400 years, long after the fear of witchcraft has faded. The theory itself, the literal idea of a walking, talking uterus, will eventually die out, but the ghost it leaves behind, the core idea, proves to be incredibly resilient. The ghost is this: that a woman's mind is a hostage to her biology, that her emotions are symptoms, and that her reproductive organs are the source of her irrationality. This central ghost will simply change its clothes to match the fashion of the times. As we float into the 17th and 18th centuries, the age of reason, the noxious vapors of the physician begin to sound a bit old-fashioned. The new science of the nervous system is taking hold. So the theory adopts. Doctors now begin to talk about a woman's delicate nerves. Hysteria is no longer caused by a wandering room or toxic fumes, but by an oversensitive, easily excited nervous system, which is, of course, believed to be intrinsically linked to the state of her uterus. A difficult menstruation or a lack of marital activity could, they argued, send jarring signals through the nerves, causing fits, fainting spells, and emotional outbursts. The language has changed from humors to nerves, but the scapegoat remains the same. The womb is still pulling the strings, only now it's using nerves instead of vapors. This nervous explanation becomes incredibly fashionable among upper-class women. To be diagnosed with a case of the vapors or nervous sensibility was almost a status symbol. It suggested that a woman was so refined, so delicate, that she was constitutionally unable to handle the stresses of the world. It was a far cry from the terrifying diagnosis you faced, but it came from the same root, the belief that the female body was inherently flawed and pathological. A strange offshoot of this era was the invention of the medical vibrator in the late 19th century. Physicians, still believing that hysterical symptoms were caused by a lack of sexual release, would perform tedious and time-consuming manual pelvic massages on their female patients to induce what they clinically referred to as a hysterical paroxysm, finding this work to be a strain on their hands. Inventive doctors developed mechanical devices to do the job more efficiently. It's a bizarre and often misunderstood piece of medical history, but it shows how stubbornly the core idea that a woman's psychological distress could be cured by a physical, uterine-focused intervention persisted into the industrial age. The academic debate here is about continuity versus change. Did the modern understanding of mental health evolve from these old theories, or did it represent a complete break from them? Most scholars argue for continuity. They trace a direct lineage from the wandering womb of the Greeks, to the nervous sensibility of the 18th century, to the Freudian psychoanalysis of the 20th century. The names change, but the underlying assumptions about female irrationality and its biological source remain disturbingly consistent. From our vantage point, we see your small story echoing through time. We see your personal tragedy being replayed, in different costumes and with different scripts. In countless doctors' offices and hospital wards for centuries, the specific fear of witchcraft may recede, but the general fear and suspicion of the female body and mind will linger. The ghost in the machine of medicine is a powerful one. It whispers that a woman's testimony about her own feelings cannot be trusted, because her feelings are not rational responses to her life. They are the chaotic byproducts of her reproductive system. It whispers that her pain, whether physical or emotional, is probably an exaggeration, a performance. As we look down from our timeless perch, we see that your struggle was not just yours alone. You were an early victim of a long and stubborn medical tradition. The wandering womb theory may seem absurd to us now, a silly superstition from a less enlightened time. But its legacy is woven into the very fabric of Western medicine, a faint but discernible pattern in the tapestry. The ghost of your wandering womb is still walking, a quiet, unseen presence in the background of a story that is still, even now, trying to find its end. As we continue our drift through time, we see the world begin to change in a fundamental way. The dim, smoky light of your medieval world is giving way to a brighter, harsher, and more inquisitive light, the light of the Renaissance. This is an age of rediscovery, of art, of exploration, and it is an age of anatomy. For the first time in over 1,000 years, the sanctity of the human body is being challenged, not by priests, but by artists and scientists, men like Leonardo da Vinci. Most importantly for our story, a Flemish physician named Andreas Vesalius are not content to simply read the ancient texts of Galen. They want to see for themselves. They want to open the book of the human body and read its pages directly. We find ourselves in a cold, stone-walled room. In the center, on a wooden table, lies a human body. Arranged in steep, circular tiers around it are students and scholars. Their faces a mix of morbid curiosity and intellectual excitement. This is an anatomy theater, and the man with the knife, the man demonstrating the true structure of the body, is Vesalius. In 1543, he publishes a book that will change medicine forever. De Humanico Puris Fabricae, on the fabric of the human body. It is a masterpiece of art and science, filled with breathtakingly detailed and accurate illustrations of human anatomy based on his own dissections. And in this book, Vesalius does something revolutionary. He dares to correct Galen. He shows, with undeniable visual proof, that Galen, who had based most of his human anatomy on the dissection of apes and pigs, had been wrong about many things, and one of the things he corrects, quietly but definitively, is the nature of the uterus. Vesalius and his fellow anatomists look inside the female abdomen, and they do not find a restless animal. They find an organ held firmly in place by a series of broad, sturdy bands of tissue. They give these bands a name, ligaments. They say that the womb is not a free-floating entity, capable of wandering off in a huff. It is anchored. It is tied down. It is, from a purely mechanical standpoint, incapable of going for a walk to the throat. This anatomical discovery should have been the final nail in the coffin of the wandering womb theory. The physical evidence was clear. The animal in the posture was, in fact, securely tethered. You would think that this revelation would have immediately put an end to the diagnosis. But a ghost as old and powerful as this one does not die so easily. The theory was too useful, too deeply embedded in the culture, to be dispatched by a simple fact. So, it adapted again. Doctors, faced with the undeniable proof that the womb couldn't literally travel, fell back on the more sophisticated explanations. They clung to Galen's idea of toxic vapors or the newer theory of agitated nerves. The womb might not be able to physically walk, they conceded, but its profound influence could still travel through the body, causing the same old chaos. The anchor of the ligaments held the organ in place, but it couldn't stop its malevolent influence from spreading. Here we see a fascinating quirk of scientific progress. Sometimes, a beautiful and convenient theory is more persuasive than an inconvenient fact. For centuries, the idea of the wandering womb had provided a simple explanation for a complex set of problems. It was a story that everyone understood. The new, anatomical truth was more complex and, in a way, less satisfying. It debunked the cause, but it didn't offer a new one, leaving doctors to fall back on invisible, untestable forces like nervous energy. The academic debate here centers on the Vesalian Revolution. Was his work really a revolution that overthrew ancient authority, or was it a more gradual evolution? The case of the wandering womb suggests it was more of an evolution. Vesalius chopped off the theory's legs, but its ghost simply learned to float, untroubled by its newfound lack of mobility. It proves that a medical belief can be more than just a scientific hypothesis. It can be a cultural institution, resistant to change even in the face of overwhelming evidence. So even as the light of anatomical science floods into the dissecting theatres of Europe, the shadow of the wandering womb persists. The image of the organ, securely anchored by its ligaments in Vesalius' beautiful drawings, is a symbol of a battle half won. The womb has been physically pinned down, its location fixed on the map of the body, but its reputation, its character, as a source of female instability and madness, remains at large, a fugitive from anatomical fact, ready to find a new home in the emerging sciences of the mind. We float forward again, leaving the Renaissance and anatomy theatres behind. We drift through the Enlightenment, past the age of nervous sensibility, and arrive in a world that feels both more modern and, in some ways, strangely familiar. We are now in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The world is one of gaslight, steam engines, and a burgeoning new science of the mind, psychoanalysis. We find ourselves in a quiet, tastefully decorated office in Vienna. The air is thick with cigar smoke. The room is filled with books, ancient statues, and a collection of archaeological artifacts. And on a simple couch, a well-dressed woman is talking about her anxieties, her dreams, her frustrations. Listening to her, just out of her line of sight, is a bearded, thoughtful-looking man named Sigmund Freud. The ghost of the wandering womb has found its new home. It has finally completed its long journey from the pelvis to the head. It no longer needs to wander, because it has found a new name and a new address, the unconscious mind. Freud takes the ancient concept of hysteria and gives it its most modern, most influential makeover. He dismisses the old ideas of wandering organs and noxious vapors as primitive superstitions. But he does not dismiss the disease itself. For Freud, hysteria is very real. But its source is not the physical womb, but a psychological one. The cause, he argues, is unresolved emotional conflict, repressed memories, and unfulfilled desires, nearly always of a sexual nature, that have been pushed down into the dark, unseen corners of the mind. It sounds like a revolutionary break from the past, and in many ways, it was. Freud gave women a language to talk about their inner lives, their traumas, and their desires in a way that had never been possible before. He listened to them. He took their psychological pain seriously. But if you look closely, the old ghost is still there, wearing a new, well-tailored suit. Freud's theory of hysteria, particularly in his early work, is still profoundly centered on women. While he acknowledged that men could suffer from it, the archetypal hysterical patient was always female, and the source of the conflict was almost invariably traced back to her sexuality, her penis envy, her relationship with her father. The problem, once again, originates from the fact of her being female. The physical womb is replaced by a psychological one. The ancient Greek word hysteria is still there, hiding in plain sight in the name of the diagnosis. The old idea that a woman's distress is rooted in her reproductive and sexual nature is not abolished. It is simply sublimated. The cure is no longer foul smells or marriage, but the talking cure, a long and often arduous process of dredging up repressed memories to make the unconscious conscious. One of the most fascinating uncontroversial parts of Freud's legacy is his seduction theory, initially based on the stories his female patients told him. He believed that their hysterical symptoms were caused by real childhood sexual abuse. However, he later abandoned this theory, claiming instead that these memories were not real, that were, in fact, fantasies, wish fulfillments generated by the woman's own unconscious desires. The academic debate surrounding this reversal is colossal and still rages today. Did Freud genuinely misinterpret his data? Or did he buckle under the pressure of a society that was not ready to confront the reality of widespread child abuse? Whatever the reason, the result was a tragic echo of the past. Once again, a woman's testimony about her own experience was reinterpreted by a male authority figure as a fantasy, a fiction, a product of her own unreliable, desire-driven mind. You, in your medieval hut, were told your feelings of suffocation were just vapors. The Victorian woman on Freud's couch was told her memories of trauma were just a wish. The mechanism is more sophisticated, but the dismissal is the same. The diagnosis of hysteria as a formal psychiatric condition would persist in diagnostic manuals until 1980. It was the great-great-great-great-grandchild of the wandering womb, a direct descendant that carried the family resemblance for 2.5 millennia. The Freudian couch, in a way, is the final destination of the wandering womb. The journey that started with a feeling of tightness in your chest ends here, in a theory about the tangled desires of the unconscious. The language is now about egos and dids, repression and sublimation, but the fundamental assumption that female psychology is a problem to be solved, a wild territory to be mapped and tamed by a male expert, remains eerily intact. The ghost has finally settled down, but it hasn't left the building. And so, we leave the smoky offices of Vienna behind. We float forward one last time, through the tumult of the 20th century, past world wars and cultural revolutions, and we arrive right here, right now, in the quiet of this present moment. The journey is over. We bring you back from the tightrope of your impossible choice, back from the anatomy theater, back from the psychoanalyst's couch. You can let go of that ancient fear. You can just breathe. The diagnosis of hysteria is gone from the medical books. No credible doctor today believes your uterus can go for a walk or that your nerves are too delicate. We now have the language of endocrinology, of neuroscience, of psychology. We can talk about hormonal fluctuations, about anxiety disorders, about panic attacks, about trauma. We have words for your experience that are not steeped in blame or superstition. We have, in many ways, woken up from the long, strange dream of the wandering womb. The progress is undeniable. A woman like you today, experiencing the hot flashes and anxiety of menopause, would hopefully be met with understanding, with hormone replacement therapy, with counseling, with a whole toolkit of treatments based on evidence and empathy, not on ancient prejudice. The unnatural has been explained by nature. The madness has been given a name under context. But have we truly banished the ghost, or does it still linger in more subtle forms? The story of the wandering womb is a powerful parable about how easily a lack of knowledge can curdle into fear and prejudice, and how that prejudice can be institutionalized, given the stamp of authority, and used to silence and control. We still live in a world where women's pain is, at times, taken less seriously than men's. Studies have shown that women often have to wait longer in emergency rooms to receive pain medication. Conditions that primarily affect women, like endometriosis or fibromyalgia, have historically been underfunded and under-researched, sometimes dismissed by doctors as being all in their heads. A chillingly modern echo of the old diagnosis. The ghost is quieter now, but if you listen carefully, you can still hear it whisper. It whispers in the suggestion that a woman's anger is hormonal and therefore irrational. It whispers when a woman's legitimate complaint is dismissed as her being overly emotional. The strange, sad detail for our modern age is found in the corners of the internet, where pseudo-scientific wellness trends sometimes echo these ancient ideas in bizarre new ways. You can find womb wellness gurus who speak of the uterus as an intuitive energy center that can be unblocked, or who prescribe scented steam baths, eerily similar to the ones you endured, for spiritual cleansing. The language is now of energy and vibrations instead of humors, but the idea that the womb is a mystical, semi-autonomous entity with special needs and desires has improbably survived. The final academic debate is about where we go from here. How do we ensure that we don't create new medical myths to replace the old ones? How do we listen to patients' experiences without filtering them through our own biases? The story of the wandering womb serves as a powerful cautionary tale. It reminds us that medicine is never just science. It is always, also, a reflection of the culture in which it is practiced, with all its blind spots and prejudices. So we leave you here, back in the safety of your own time, the world you inhabited, with its foul-smelling potions and its fear of witchcraft, feels very far away, but the questions it raises are not. The struggle to be heard, to have one's own experience believed, to be seen as a whole person and not just a collection of symptoms or a faulty organ. That struggle is a timeless one. The story of the wandering womb is, in the end, a story about the power of listening. And as we end our journey, the quiet in this room feels less like an absence of sound, and more like a space to finally, truly, be heard. And so, our long journey through this strange and winding passage of history now comes to a gentle rest. The story has been told. Its echoes left to fade into the quiet of your room. There is nothing more to analyze, nothing more to understand. There is only this moment of peaceful stillness. If you are still awake, and that is perfectly fine, you might notice the gentle weight of your body, feeling supported, feeling secure. You can feel the soft fabric of your blanket and the coolness of the air on your skin. These are the simple, true sensations of the present. The distant world of wandering wombs and whispered accusations has dissolved, leaving only this safe and comfortable space. Allow your mind to drift away from the story now, like a boat untethered from a dock, floating gently on a calm, dark sea. Let each word I say be a soft trickle, guiding you further out into the peaceful waters of slumber. The thoughts of the day are far behind you on a distant shore, and the thoughts of tomorrow have not yet appeared on the horizon. There is only the here and now, this gentle, sleepy tide, carrying you effortlessly toward your own quiet dreams. The curtain falls on this peaceful scene. For those still in the audience, the next play is ready to begin whenever you are. Good night.